This could change everything for the Phoenix Suns as they are a second apron team, as we all know, with a bunch of salary restrictions to make trades. But could they possibly dip under that second apron and get some of those luxuries back? We'll be diving in, looking at the Phoenix Suns pod, talking to Bobby Marks, explaining how the Phoenix Suns would be able to do that and possibly get a better talented roster with the Big Three. All of that and more on this episode of Suns Digest. I'm Bruce Veliz alongside my co-host C.J. Pierre. Before we dive in on all of this Phoenix Suns news though, 94% of you guys who watch our videos are not subscribed, and we greatly appreciate it. That number is going down every video, but if you guys want to make sure you stay up to date on daily Phoenix Suns content throughout all the news, all the drama, the off season, this is the place for you as we're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers here on Suns Digest. Without further ado, CJ, let's dive into the topic at hand today. Make sure to grab a snack as it's going to be a jam-packed episode. And we're going to be diving in and looking at the explanation of the second apron. As we mentioned in the introduction, Bobby Marks was on the Phoenix Suns pod alongside a bunch of the Phoenix Suns, authors, writers, analysts, stuff like that, and kind of was breaking down how the Phoenix Suns could work this off season. We want to look at this tweet. The Suns are pretty much handcuffed to the second apron, as we already know. But Bobby Marks is here to help and say how the Suns could get some out of the loopholes. Now, CJ, when you hear that, what are your kind of expectations? What are your kind of thoughts from hearing that as a Suns fan? Are you kind of wanting to get out of these loopholes, or do you guys want to be, salary strapped to that $209 million? You're muted, CJ.
So of course, you don't want the Suns to be, completely cap strapped. It's kind of a rough go of it, when you're a second apron team. But Bobby Marks, with ESPN, he's one of the smartest cap strategists that there is in the game right now. And he is also a former, was in a front office previously, was in New Jersey with the Nets, and in Brooklyn as well. So you gotta take what he says, and he's looking at these kind of new rules and kind of breaking it down. And I think there are some avenues that the Suns absolutely have to take in order to improve this roster. There's no way that they can just take what's on the roster right now, what's against the cap right now, and move forward and try and build a team with just what they have. I think there are some options definitely that they can do. There are some ways to maneuver around. There are trades that are available to them that they can make. Some of them may not necessarily provide immediate impact, but they could provide some cap relief so that they can make other trades and other maneuvers as well down the road that will, allow it. So there's a lot that needs to happen. Guys that have player options, potentially, opting out and seeing what they can do on the open market and possibly coming back on veteran minimums. There's, potentially offloading a contract that can bring back a couple of players. That is an option, even if you're a second apron team. Now, what you can't do is you can't combine aggregate salaries to acquire one player. It would have to be player for player, and then the money has to match. Those are kind of the rules. But in terms of finding a team that maybe has some cap space and might be willing to take on a contract like a Yusuf Nurkic, and then you can acquire a player, maybe a couple of guys, maybe some draft capital. That is an option for the Suns that they have to not only possibly get underneath the second apron before the beginning of the season, but still find ways to improve the roster quickly.
I think so too, CJ. I definitely think that they need to improve. And you brought up a valuable name in that search for the Phoenix Suns. One that's been kind of thrown around here in trade talks, possibly coming back, and that is Yusuf Nurkic. If you guys have missed, we've already broken down some trade videos going over it. We've already heard your complaints saying, they can't do these trades, they can't do it because of the second apron, but Bobby Marks kind of went into some detail looking at that. So like we mentioned, looking at the salary cap here with the Phoenix Suns, we can see Yusuf Nurkic makes around $18 million next season. So the Phoenix Suns would have to find somebody to take on that $18 million. And in this pod, Bobby Marks, if you guys want to check it out on Twitter, you can watch the full clip. He breaks it down and says that the Phoenix Suns would be able to offload a guy in Yusuf Nurkic to a team that has salary cap. Possibly a team like the Pistons or the Sixers or even like the Spurs or something like that. A team that is willing to take on Yusuf Nurkic's contract, which would then free the Suns of $18 million and drop them around to that second apron threshold around $2 million less. Therefore, maybe not pick up one of those player options, kind of drop down. Then you have so much free stuff. You have, the mid-level exception that you can use. You can now aggregate salaries and trades, and you can maybe even go after some better veteran minimum guys and possibly have some guys in the buyout market. So CJ, that ultimately brings us to the next question on what the Suns can do, and is this the smart decision for the Suns to be making these moves here? Now, I want to delay that question to you, kind of defer and hear your thoughts on it. With Jusuf Nurkic, with this whole situation, do you think it would be smart for the Phoenix Suns to possibly look to move off of him in a deal to drop under the second apron? Or do you think it would be smarter for the Suns to do a one-for-one deal with Jusuf Nurkic and getting another salary in return?
That's a tough question, but I
It is a
think
little
it really
tough, but
I think it depends on the possibility, right? What the potential is, in terms of what you can land, and how valuable other teams think Nurkic is. I think just kind of off the cuff, I don't think teams look at him as he's the missing piece. He's the going to be the thing that puts us over the top, to becoming a championship contender. I don't think there are contending teams that are necessarily thinking along those lines. So you think about a team like the Philadelphia 76ers, that's probably out. They already have Joel Embiid. They're not looking to their final piece is not, a backup center that's making $18 million. So that's probably out. You're probably looking at a team that is still in a rebuilding phase and maybe has some salaries that they're trying to offload, so that they can, maybe, years down the line. So that's when a team like the Detroit Pistons comes into mind, and what kind of assets that they may be willing, to move off of in terms of what they're doing. I know that people in Detroit very disappointed that they did not get the number one overall pick in this upcoming draft. They dropped to the fifth spot in the draft lottery. So there's no real knowing what the Pistons are going to do. They're very far away from being a contending team right now. So that is a place that you could possibly offload Nurkic in a potential one-for-one deal, or also in a situation where maybe you trade him and there's a possibility that you could get some picks back or some players back, multiple assets that you could add to this team in this roster and continue to move forward and improve. Now, there you do leave a hole right at center if you just move off of Nurkic, but then that's where some of these other possibilities come into play. Or do you have access to that mid-level exception? Are you able to make another trade that's going to allow you to actually pick up some talent and aggregate some of those salaries after that, so you can fill that void that Nurkic would have? So I think there are options, with the Suns and with Nurkic. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be like their top priority is moving off of him specifically, but if you're trying to keep the big three together, which is kind of what everyone expects, who's the next person down the line? Who's the next name on the list? And Nurkic is that name. So it's completely expected that he's going to be the one that's the most featured on the trading block.
Yeah, and you brought up some great points, CJ, with diving into that I kind of want to get into. One, talking about the salary and kind of looking at Nurkic. Obviously, a team like the Sixers who have that salary, they're not going to look at him. They already have Joel Embiid. But Nurkic making around that $18 million, that still is a quality starting center in the NBA. That's not really like a backup center type quality money. So I could totally agree with you saying that I think that if a team is going to trade for him, they're going to want him to be that starting caliber center. Also, when looking at it, talking about the Pistons, I think that would be one of the perfect moves for the Suns to maybe get rid of him. They have a lot of holes in their center room with, Jalen Duran. He's a nice young guy, but he's on a rookie scale contract. James Wiseman. They used to have Marvin Bagley. They have like an abundance of just bigs Isaiah Stewart that they've been testing, non-testing, all that type of stuff. I'd like to see how they would evaluate with Jusuf Nurkic, and I think they'd be a team that's interested in him. We've seen them that they wanted to be a team like the Rockets this season, kind of bringing in those veteran-type players. And I think that Jusuf Nurkic could be one of those veteran guys to kind of help jumpstart this ship, kind of similar to a Dylan Brooks signing with the Houston Rockets did in the offseason, similar to that. Kind of breaking it down, though, I agree with you. I think that he's going to be one of the guys that's most likely moved, just because as we look at the salary, he's one of the guys that has a movable contract that's not, $6 million, or Royce O'Neal or Grayson Allen, who is just extended or will be getting extended. But as we look at the, committed salary, if they're looking to move off Nurkic, it'd still be a second apron team, so they'd have to move some other financials down, possibly a guy in Eric Gordon, Josh Okogie, maybe even Bull. We'll have to wait and see, or maybe do some other trades. And we're going to have some more videos breaking that down. We saw an article, so CJ and I will have another video coming out with some Nassir Little possible trades, some David Roddy trades, kind of speculating all of that. Thank you guys so much. Oh, CJ, you want to say something? We're muted right now. Quick, 1 second.
Yeah, before we kind of cut away, I think it's also important to note this is when we're talking about Nurkic, he's not an expiring contract. He does have 2 years remaining on his deal, so his contract becomes he's not one of those contracts that teams are going to look at and be like, okay, this is going to be something that comes off the books right away. So that there is some complexity to the Nurkic situation as a whole. You would probably want to look to find a team that's going to be okay with having him for a couple of years. So you kind of really have to look around and see which teams may be interested in acquiring him. And for that stretch of time, even though he may not be looked at as like the final piece. A team that is probably in a situation like Houston, like you were saying, when they brought in Dylan Brooks as someone who could be a veteran that could kind of help them along. Would they be interested in possibly working with the Washington Wizards again on a possible deal? Are the Charlotte Hornets a team that might be interested in bringing in Nurkic and possibly having him play some type of role? Then you can look at some other teams that are possibly going to be in the second apron and see if there's some salary matches that you can possibly do. The Denver Nuggets are kind of in the need for some more big man help. That's kind of a situation that has not necessarily talked about. But I think if you're James Jones, you're the crew over there in the front office for the Phoenix Suns, you have to look at all these possibilities. You have to stress all these different things, look at all these different options and see what you can do because you have to improve this roster. You can't just run it back with the exact same team that you have. And I think that, bringing in Tellem from the Nets, he's the three-team trade guy. He's the, cap, mastermind that they brought in this league. I think that that's going to be a big help. So look for the Suns to explore three-team trades. Look for the Suns to explore moving off of guys like Nurkic and Nassir Little. Look for them to possibly reach out to guys like Eric Gordon and Josh Okogie, and maybe you don't want to pick up your player option. Maybe you want to look and see, what else you can get. And maybe, like Bob and Mark said, they can say, hey, if you're out there, you're not finding what you want, there is a veteran minimum waiting for you that could help this cap situation as well. So many different options. The Suns, yes, there are a lot of restrictions being a second apron team, but that does not mean that they are helpless. Okay, there are ways to work around it.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the things that we kind of needed to proclaim and kind of bring up because a lot of people in the comment section were harping on us, about the trades, all that type of stuff. Guys, we know that you can't do it 3-for-1. We know that. Trust me. We're just trying to show you the kind of moves that we have to make to get a deal possibly done to land one of those guys. But ultimately, I do think and agree with CJ that this team is going to need some moves around the edges. Regardless if it's Nurkic, Nassir Little, possibly some of those low-ender guys, or even bringing in some vet min guys like maybe Robert Covington or a Kyle Lowry type deal could help out the Suns. So we'll be breaking down all the news, all the drama revolving around this team. We'll have another video coming out later today diving in on, the David Roddy trades, possibly a Nassir Little trades, but some speculations of possible guys that the Suns could bring in. So if you guys want to make sure you stay up to date, stay tuned to all the Phoenix Suns content. Hit the subscribe button as you guys head out of the video. Would greatly appreciate it. From your boys Bruce and CJ, signing off on Suns Digest. We'll catch you guys in the next video, and go Phoenix Suns.